The moment that unmasks you is not when life gets loud. It is when nothing is happening and you still cannot remain where you are. A quiet room, a warm shower, a plate in front of you, a face across the table, and still there is a hidden engine revving inside your chest. It turns stillness into interrogation, turns waiting into tension, turns one unfinished thought into a whole courtroom of accusation. That is why you end the day feeling spent even when your body did not labor, why your muscles feel burdened by something you never touched. You are not only tired from living, you are exhausted from being hunted by the mind's nonstop narration of life. Most people think the problem is stress, schedules, noise, other people, money, the world pressing in from the outside. Sometimes it is, but often the deeper wound is that you never arrive anywhere before your mind drags you somewhere else. You sit down, but inwardly you are already explaining yourself, defending yourself, reliving a scene, rehearsing a future collapse. Your eyes are open, yet you are staring through everything because attention has been kidnapped by a story that is not happening now. So the body stays here, but the self keeps fleeing, and absence becomes your most practiced habit. This is where the Buddha cuts through the confusion with brutal simplicity. In MN 131, he does not flatter your drift into memory or projection. He says not to chase what is gone, and not to build your life inside what has not yet arrived, but to clearly know what is present here. Not because the past is unreal, and not because planning is forbidden, but because suffering multiplies when your heart takes up residence in shadows. The past becomes replay, regret, injury, identity. The future becomes fantasy, dread, bargaining, tension. Meanwhile, the only living moment is abandoned. And what you call being overwhelmed is often just the cost of worshipping time zones the body can never actually enter. So no, switching off the mind is not self-violence. It is not numbing the brain or becoming dull or empty. It is refusing to treat every passing thought as law, every emotional surge as prophecy, every inner voice as a trustworthy witness. It is seeing the machinery without kneeling to it. It is letting a thought be a thought instead of promoting it to the rank of truth. Presence begins the instant obedience ends, the instant you stop saluting whatever appears in the theater of the skull. That is the severing point, and it is far more radical than most people understand. Start there with something almost embarrassingly small. One breath, just one full breath, honestly felt. Not the concept of breathing, not a spiritual performance, not an idea about calm, but the raw fact of air entering and leaving. The coolness near the nostrils, the ribs widening, the belly shifting, the soft release on the way out. In MN 118, the Buddha ties mindfulness of breathing directly to training the body, feelings, and mind, not as decoration, but as a real path of stabilization. Breath matters because it happens nowhere else. Not yesterday, not tomorrow, not in imagination. Only here, only now. And the first humiliation arrives fast. Before one clean cycle is finished, the mind bolts. It runs to an old argument, a bill, a wound, a fantasy, a line you wish you had delivered better, a disaster that does not exist yet. That sting you feel when you notice this is not failure. It is the first honest crack in the illusion that you are fully in charge. Until then, you thought you were steering. Now you see how easily any bait can jerk you across the inner world. That pain is useful. It is the beginning of waking up from the lie of imagined mastery. Then comes the mistake almost everyone makes, discovering the noise and immediately declaring war on it. You notice agitation and want to crush it, silence it, exile it, beat it into submission, as if force could produce freedom. But the mind feeds on centrality. It grows huge whenever you make it the most important thing in the room, even through hatred. The Buddha did not teach strangling thoughts by brute will. He taught clear seeing, steady seeing, seeing without collapse, into identification. The moment you fight every thought as an enemy, you are still chained to it by attention. So when a thought appears, do something simpler and sharper. Name it inwardly. Thought. Not my truth, not my destiny, not my personality, not a revelation, just thought. Dry, clean, immediate, no debate, no commentary, no autobiography built around a passing mental weather pattern. You watch it arrive, and you watch it fade, and in that small act a throne is removed from inside the head. What ruled you begins to look less like a king, and more like movement passing through open space. The same honesty must be brought into the body, because the mind loves abstraction, while suffering brands itself onto flesh. Feel your jaw, the way it clenches without permission, your shoulders rising like you are bracing for a blow, your stomach gripping itself shut. Notice the throat, the forehead, the chest, the hands, how much tension has become so familiar that you renamed it normal. You have lived in contraction so long that the prison started to look like furniture, started to feel like your natural shape. But the body is telling the truth about what the mind has been doing to you all day. This is why presence is not a pretty concept. It is contact. It is water touching your hands while washing a dish, and actually being felt before thought turns the sink into a tribunal. It is the foot meeting the ground while walking, the warmth of coffee, the pressure of a chair, the sound of a voice before self-defense starts rehearsing. It is taking a shower without turning steam into a courtroom and silence into a threat. These seem like tiny acts, but they are devastating to the false self, because ego survives by keeping you elsewhere. That same false self depends on one deeper confusion. You keep assuming that whatever arises inside you is you. A fear appears and instantly you say, "This is me." A shame appears and instantly you say, "This is my core." But the Buddha's teaching on not-self tears opened that habit. Body, feeling, perception, formations, consciousness do not obey like property under an owner's command. If they did, you would simply order pain not to arise, panic not to surge, thought not to spiral, sorrow not to return. They move according to conditions, and suffering sharpens when you glue identity onto what was never stable enough to be owned. That is why one of the most liberating sentences is also one of the hardest to embody. This is being known, but it is not what I am. Right now, the mind says no one loves you. Later it says everyone needs you. Then it says you ruined everything. Then it says you will conquer everything. If you surrender identity to each thought, you become a servant of smoke, bowing to whatever shape the vapor takes today. The practice does not make you cold. It makes you less gullible in the face of your own mental theater. You do not become less alive. You become less hypnotized. Another trap is more socially rewarded, which is why it hides so well. The endless inner churn calls itself intelligence. It dresses up as carefulness, as responsibility, as depth, as being prepared, while underneath it is often just fear wearing polished clothes. You say you are processing, but you are circling. You say you are getting ready, but you are postponing life. You say you need to think it through, but what you often mean is that you cannot bear uncertainty without manufacturing control. And while the mind negotiates with what cannot be controlled, the living present spills through your fingers again. Then come the hindrances, the thieves, the Buddha named with terrifying precision, because they still raid human attention every day. Desire is first. Once wanting takes over, you stop meeting what is here and begin chasing what is missing. Your whole interior leans forward toward the next hit, the next message, the next pleasure, the next answer, the next relief. Wanting promises intensity, but often what it delivers is scattering, because a mind hooked by craving cannot rest in the ordinary long enough to see clearly. And without that resting, there is no real presence, only pursuit dressed up as life. Aversion burns from the other side. One insult, one disappointment, one inconvenience, and suddenly the whole inner world is on fire. You replay the scene, write new lines for yourself, sharpen the enemy, intensify the grievance, feed the heat, and call it righteousness. but inwardly it is poison taken repeatedly by the one who drinks it, a private intoxication disguised as moral clarity. The price is immediate. The body hardens, the breath shortens, the now disappears, and your entire being becomes an altar to resistance. To see aversion as it is being born is a profound act of strength, because it stops resentment from building a home inside you. Then there is sloth and torpor, the counterfeit peace that feels like fog, heaviness, emotional shutdown, the wish to blur out. It can look gentle from the outside, but often it is just another flight from direct contact with reality. This is not the stillness the Buddha praised. It is not living quiet. It is dimness, dullness, the mind turning down the lights to avoid seeing. Real presence is awake, awake even in discomfort, awake even when what is felt is not flattering, soothing, or easy to hold. You are not being asked to disappear into haze. You are being asked to brighten into lucidity. Restlessness is the one modern life will happily call normal while it eats you alive. The compulsion to check, switch, scroll, open another tab, reach for another voice, create another plan, interrupt emptiness before it reveals anything. You confuse movement with vitality because stillness would force an encounter with your own unfinished interior. So you keep running, not always with your legs, but with attention, with appetite, with the nervous twitch that cannot stay inside one breath. Yet vision is born in staying, not in fleeing, and the Buddha's path becomes visible precisely where escape is interrupted, and doubt arrives with a more elegant sabotage. Not the honest doubt that investigates, but the sterile doubt that postpones practice forever. Is this the right method, the best posture, the ideal timing, the highest teaching, the most efficient system, the perfect state to begin? So instead of tasting the water, you keep discussing water. Instead of breathing consciously, you compare instructions. Instead of learning through contact, you wait for certainty, and certainty never comes because it was never the doorway. The doorway is contact, repetition, seeing, failing, returning, and letting clarity grow from use rather than from theory. Take this into the most dangerous moments, not just meditation. Somebody says something, and the body stiffens before a word leaves your mouth. That is a sacred second. Feel the pulse, the tightening, the urge to strike back, explain, defend, punish, perform. If you can remain present there, even briefly, you interrupt an entire chain of suffering before it becomes speech, action, consequence, regret. Presence is not only sitting quietly with closed eyes, it is refusing to hand the wheel to the automatic surge in the exact moment it demands power. That single second of lucidity can change relationships, decisions, and the direction of a life. Your speech will reveal immediately whether you are living from presence or from mental overflow. When the mind is ungoverned, the mouth follows, interrupting, over-explaining, promising what is not true, defending before hearing, filling every gap with self. A quieter mind does not become passive. It becomes capable of listening without constantly protecting an image. And that is another blow to the ego, because presence strips costume after costume until you stop speaking as a wound, performing its survival. Then words begin to come from vision instead of panic, and even the atmosphere around your relationships begins to change.